The story of a life marked by horror, loss, and persecution might seem destined to end in despair. Yet the narrative presented in this autobiography is fundamentally different. It is a profound meditation on human resilience, on the capacity to transform suffering into wisdom, and above all, on the deliberate choice to cultivate happiness despite the darkest circumstances. Published when its author reached the age of 100, this book stands as a living testament to the strength of the human spirit and a timeless lesson about what truly makes life worth living. The story begins in a Germany that few would recognize today. Born in 1920 in Leipzig, a German city with centuries-long tolerance for Jews who had long been an integral part of its economy and society, the narrator grows up in a prosperous Jewish family. For him and his family, German identity takes precedence over religious identity. They are not merely Germans who happen to be Jewish. They are Germans, period. This conviction, deeply rooted, will be tested in ways that are almost unimaginable. The narrator's childhood is that of a privileged child, surrounded by familial affection and opportunity. His father, a resourceful businessman and loving parent, represents a figure of stability and wisdom. Life flows with a certain bourgeois normalcy, with its simple joys and natural expectations of a promising future. The young boy dreams of engineering studies, a respectable career, an ordinary and happy life. But in 1933, this normalcy collapses. The appointment of Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany marks the beginning of a gradual and relentless transformation of German society. Anti-Semitic laws accumulate, first subtle, then increasingly explicit. They begin to tear apart the social fabric. The young boy can no longer celebrate his bar mitzvah at Leipzig's Grand Synagogue. His high school expels him. Childhood friends become strangers. The world he knew disintegrates day by day. Facing this growing reality, his father demonstrates remarkable ingenuity. He sends his son far from Leipzig to Tuttlingen to pursue engineering studies under a false identity. These 5 years of isolation, separated from his family, are marked by profound loneliness, but also by fierce determination to succeed. The young man works hard, focuses on his studies, and builds a secret life, always conscious of the danger lurking. In 1938, the narrator decides to return to Leipzig to surprise his parents on their 20th wedding anniversary. It is an act of filial love, an attempt to reclaim the family connection lost during these years of forced exile. But fate has decided otherwise. He arrives precisely on the night of Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, that nationwide pogrom marking the brutal escalation of Nazi persecution. What follows is blind and systematic violence. The young man is beaten without mercy, arrested, and sent to the Buchenwald concentration camp. Here, in this first camp, he meets Kurt Hirschfeld, a man who will become far more than a mere fellow prisoner. Kurt will be his friend, his brother, his reason to survive the terrible years that follow. At Buchenwald, prisoners, primarily middle-class Jews, endure routine torture, systematic humiliation, and arbitrary murder. It is a brutal introduction to the concentration camp universe, a foretaste of the hell that awaits. But chance intervenes. A soldier recognizes the young man from his engineering school and helps him obtain work in a factory. This work, seemingly insignificant, saves his life. What follows is a series of escapes and captures, an odyssey of survival that traverses wartime Europe. With his father's help, the narrator escapes Buchenwald and crosses the Belgian border. They meet in Brussels, but before his mother and sister can join them, he is arrested by Belgian gendarmes for being an illegal alien, a year in a refugee camp. Then, in 1940, Germany invades Belgium and France. The narrator attempts to escape to England, but the chaos of the Dunkirk evacuation makes this impossible. He finds himself in the south at Gurs, a French concentration camp where he spends 7 months. Then, when the Vichy regime agrees to hand Jewish prisoners over to the Nazis in exchange for French prisoners, he is put on a train to Auschwitz. But even in this moment of absolute despair, He finds a hidden resource within himself. He uses a stolen screwdriver to pry up the floorboards of his compartment and escapes. For a week, he jumps from train to train, gradually making his way back to Brussels. And there, in an attic, he finds his family, his father, mother, and sister, hiding for months. For a time, he works secretly in a factory to support them. But in 1943, the Gestapo discovers them. They are all arrested and put on a train to Auschwitz. The journey lasts 9 days. Upon arrival at Auschwitz, Dr. Josef Mengele performs his infamous selection. The narrator is chosen for forced labor. His parents are not. They are murdered in the gas chambers shortly after arrival. He will never see them again. At Auschwitz, even for those who escape immediate death, life is typically very short. Death by starvation, freezing, beatings, overwork, and suicide is commonplace. Guards murder prisoners arbitrarily for trivial infractions. The average life expectancy for those not killed immediately is approximately 7 months. But the narrator possesses 2 advantages that will allow him to survive. First, his friendship with Kurt Hirschfeld, whom he knew at Buchenwald. This friendship is not a luxury, it is an existential necessity. In a universe designed to dehumanize, to transform men into numbers, this human connection is an act of resistance. The 2 friends support each other, share meager resources, and give each other reasons to live. Second, his mechanical skills. They earn him the status of economically indispensable Jew, a classification that offers relative protection against the arbitrary cruelty of the guards. This status does not make him safe, but it makes him slightly less vulnerable. And in Auschwitz, even a small difference can mean life or death. But there are also moments of unexpected humanity. Some guards, ordinary men caught in an impossible situation, demonstrate compassion. They smuggle food to prisoners. They even help the narrator in an escape attempt that fails. These moments of kindness, rare as diamonds in coal, become precious memories that remind us that even in hell, humanity can persist. In January 1945, as the Red Army approaches and the Nazis know the war is lost, the prisoners of Auschwitz are gathered and forced to march. This death march is a final act of cruelty, an attempt to kill the living evidence of atrocities. Up to 15,000 prisoners die during this march. The narrator, weakened and exhausted, saves Kurt by hiding him in the crawl space of an abandoned building. It is an act of absolute friendship, a decision that could cost him his life. The survivors are packed into a train to Buchenwald. During the 5-day journey, hundreds die from exposure. At Buchenwald, the narrator becomes so weak that he can barely eat. 4 more months of detention. Then, another march, this time with no clear destination. The narrator suspects that the Nazis intend to kill them all to eliminate the evidence of their atrocities. One night, he escapes and hides in a culvert. For several days, he survives by eating slugs and snails. With his last remaining strength, he crawls to a road where he is discovered by American troops. The Germans have finally been defeated, but the narrator spends several days hovering between life and death in a military hospital. Gradually, the narrator recovers. In Brussels, he is reunited with his sister and Kurt. He and Kurt take an apartment together, 2 men bound by an experience that few others could understand. In 1946, he marries Flora Molho, a Jewish woman who spent most of the war hiding in Brussels and Paris. A year later, holding his first child in his arms, he feels the happiness he believed lost forever return in abundance. But Belgium continues to treat him as a refugee, forcing him to reapply for citizenship every 6 months. He does not feel at home there. In 1950, he and Flore decide to move to Australia, seeking a new beginning in a new world. In Sydney, after a difficult few months, they settle into their new lives. The narrator becomes a manufacturer of medical instruments, then, after 6 years, focuses on auto mechanics and opens his own service station. In 1966, he learns a new trade, real estate, and founds his own agency, which he continues to run well into his 90s. He builds a prosperous life, raises a family, and becomes a respected citizen of his adopted community. The philosophy: happiness as an act of resistance. But the true heart of this story does not lie in the details of physical survival. It lies in the narrator's inner transformation, in his deliberate decision to reject hatred and embrace happiness. Beginning in the 1970s, the narrator starts speaking publicly about his experiences, first in small groups as a form of therapy, then before increasingly larger audiences to bear witness to the monstrosity of these almost inconceivable events. But his message is never one of anger or bitterness. It is a message of love and happiness. This decision is revolutionary. In a world that would understand if he chose vengeance, if he cultivated hatred toward those who destroyed his family, the narrator chooses something far more difficult. He chooses forgiveness. Not a weak forgiveness or passive acceptance of what happened, but active forgiveness, a conscious rejection of hatred as a way of life. He articulates a simple but profound philosophy. Happiness is the best revenge. By refusing to nurture hatred and vengeance, he refuses to let himself be imprisoned by his torturers. Hatred, he says, is a disease that may destroy the enemy, but it will destroy the one who carries it first. It is a prison for the soul. This philosophy is not born from naivete or ignorance of the reality of evil. It is a philosophy forged in fire, tested in the most extreme conditions humanity can imagine. The narrator has seen the worst that men can do to other men. He has lost his family, his childhood, his youth. And yet he chooses not to let this experience define the rest of his life. Several themes run through this narrative like golden threads, giving shape and meaning to the whole. Resilience. The narrator does not survive by accident. He survives through a combination of luck, intelligence, and fierce determination to live. At every moment when he could have given up, he finds a reason to continue. This resilience is not an innate quality, but a capacity cultivated and strengthened by each challenge overcome. Moral choice. Throughout the narrative, the narrator is confronted with moral choices. Should he escape alone or help Kurt? Should he nurture hatred or seek forgiveness? These choices define who he is far more than his circumstances, and the narrator always chooses humanity, compassion, and kindness, even when these choices are difficult or seem irrational. Friendship. Kurt Hirschfeld is not a secondary character in this story. He is central. The friendship between the two men is an act of resistance against a system designed to dehumanize. It is an affirmation that even in the most extreme conditions, human connections are possible and essential. Loss. The narrator loses his family, his youth, his native country, and millions of his co-religionists. This loss is omnipresent in the narrative, but it does not paralyze him. Instead, it becomes a source of motivation to live fully, to honor those who were lost by living a life worthy of being lived. Gratitude. Despite all he has lost, the narrator cultivates profound gratitude for what he has, for his life, for his adopted family, for the moments of happiness he has found. This gratitude is not a denial of suffering. It is an affirmation that life, even after trauma, can be beautiful and worthy of being lived. Rejection of hatred. This is perhaps the most powerful theme. The narrator categorically refuses to allow hatred to define his life. He recognizes that hatred is a natural and understandable response to what he has endured, but he consciously rejects it. This decision is an act of freedom, an affirmation that even after being deprived of so much, he still possesses the power to choose who he will be. The deliberate pursuit of happiness. The book's title is not ironic. The narrator truly believes that happiness is possible, even after trauma. And more than that, he believes that the pursuit of happiness is a moral responsibility. By choosing to be happy, By cultivating joy and gratitude, he honors those who were lost and affirms the value of life itself. This book is dedicated to future generations. It is an attempt to ensure that history does not repeat itself, that the lessons of the past are not forgotten. But what exactly are these lessons? Kindness matters. Even in the most extreme conditions, kindness matters. The guards who smuggled food, the soldiers who helped prisoners escape, the strangers who hid Jews, these acts of kindness, often small and risky, saved lives. The narrator never forgets this. He understands that in a world filled with cruelty, kindness is a revolutionary act. The narrator does not blame circumstances for his choices. He recognizes that even in concentration camps, men had choices. Some guards chose cruelty, others chose compassion. This recognition of individual responsibility is a powerful lesson for future generations. We are not simply products of our circumstances. We are the authors of our choices. The dangers of intolerance. Account clearly shows how intolerance begins with laws, exclusions, humiliations, and where it ultimately leads. It is a warning for future generations to remain vigilant against the first signs of persecution, not to assume that it cannot happen here. The value of human connection. In a world that often seeks to isolate us, to transform us into solitary consumers, the narrator's account reminds us of the crucial importance of human connection. Friendship with Kurt, love for his wife, the joy of family. These are the things that make life worthy of being lived. The power of choice. Perhaps the most important lesson is that we always have a choice. Even when our choices are limited, even when we face terrible circumstances, we always have the choice of how we respond. The narrator chooses resilience. He chooses kindness. He chooses happiness. And this capacity to choose is what makes us human. The Happiest Man on Earth is not an easy book to read. It contains vivid descriptions of the horrors of the Holocaust, details of human cruelty that are difficult to bear. But it is precisely because the narrator does not minimize the reality of suffering that his final message is so powerful. The narrator does not say that suffering was good or that it had a purpose. He does not say that everything worked out for the best. He simply says that despite the suffering, despite the loss, life can be beautiful. Happiness is possible. And more than that, happiness is a choice that we can all make. It is a message of defiance against evil, an affirmation that humanity, with all its cruelty and capacity for destruction, also possesses a remarkable capacity for resilience, kindness, and joy. The narrator, by refusing to nurture hatred, by choosing forgiveness and happiness, affirms that the Nazis did not defeat him. They destroyed his body, they killed his family, but they could not destroy his spirit. And this may be the deepest lesson of this book, that even in the darkest circumstances, we retain the power to choose who we are. We can choose hatred or forgiveness, despair or hope, bitterness or gratitude. And this choice, this power to choose, is what truly sets us free. For future generations, the message is clear. Do not let circumstances define your life. Choose kindness. Choose connection. Choose happiness. And in making these choices, honor those who were lost and affirm the immeasurable value of life itself.